Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Daisy Jones and the Six Rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something I call Take the Doughnut, which is another way to say carpe diem. It's all about going after the things that you want in life. And something that I wanted to do this year was rewatch the show Daisy Jones and the Six, but this time talk about it with other people. And now I'm getting a chance to actually talk with people who worked on the show about the show. But before I introduce today's guest, just a quick housekeeping item. If you are not familiar with the whole show, Daisy Jones and the Six, just be aware these interviews could have spoilers in them. We could say any detail from any episode in the process of answering these questions. So just know that up front. If you haven't seen the whole show, you might consider just going binging it right now and then coming back to this interview. But if you're not afraid, come join me because I'm going to be talking with Jay Traynor, who's the supervising location manager for Daisy Jones and the Six. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Melissa. It's great to be here.
I'm so
Flattered.
glad to talk with you.
Yeah.
I admit that I don't know a lot about the work, the type of work that you would have done on this show. So this is going to be for me a very interesting interview, and hopefully for those who aren't industry based, because we're going to get a chance to hear about how all those places we see on screen came to be. But
Right.
first, tell us how you got connected with this show to begin with.
I got a call from the line producer, Mike Nelson. I certainly knew about this project. I knew about the book. I knew it was in production. Mike and I had spoken back in 2019, a little bit. But a colleague of mine, her name is Kristen Wagner. Big shout out to Wags. I had done a lot of projects with Chris as an additional location manager. We worked together as a team. Mike had known Chris for 25, 30 years in the business. She's an amazing location manager that's since retired. He actually offered the job to Kristen. Kristen's like, it's too big. It's too, you need a bigger boat kind of thing. So Mike and I had spoken, and then, after COVID shut this production down about what, 4 or 5 weeks before they were supposed to start block shooting. So they were going to do the first two episodes in blocks. So that's how they were prepping. And then they pulled the plug. And so when they came back, Mike and I started talking again about the possibility of joining the show. The location manager, Mandy Dillon, who was on the show, had twins. She's an amazing location manager. She had a big team, and she had done a really nice job prepping a portion of the beginning of the show. And, you so I inherited the show. I think we started talking in April or May, and I think I started in June of 2021 prepping. So that would have been, maybe 14 weeks out from filming. And then they
Okay.
decided to crossboard, which you basically stay at a location. If it's in episode 2 and episode 3 and episode 5, you shoot all of that at that location in that time. So they call that block shooting, and that's how they kind of address. So we really made it like a big feature, even though we did different locations. We combined locations, many times, and combined the days to be able to shoot consecutively at days, because we had long terms of occupancy at a lot of the locations that we'll talk about. I'm sure you'll have some questions about, weeks, really. The band house, we were there for 6 weeks prepping it before we started shooting,
Interesting.
so yeah.
Let's scroll back a little bit on this. For the people who don't have industry knowledge, let's orient them. What did your job entail? What does a location manager do?
So a location manager, they're really kind of the linchpin between creating the look for the film with, collaborating with the creative team. So that would be with showrunners, in this case, producers, creative producers, writers, directors, obviously, although television's more of a producing and writing medium, there's still directors. So I collaborate creating the look. So we start scouting, we break down the script. The script is about everything. And then we set about coming up with a plan to find locations that will, tell the story, the visual storytelling. So that's the first part of location managing is scouting, prepping, and putting the look together. And the second part of it is the logistical part of it, is really managing the production when it's not on a soundstage. I'm really managing a lot of the elements and working with the public as well as working with all the crafts, working with every department head to kind of be able to execute on their job. So I had a really large team, both to prep and to handle the logistics of this particular enterprise.
When there is a sound stage, is there somebody who works for the sound stage that becomes the point person and then you have to coordinate timing with them?
Exactly. So we shot at Paramount, and we used, I mean, the plan with Daisy was to shoot at all the real places that were scripted, and transform them, and then find other ones that would work in conjunction with the story, right? And tapping into parts of the rock and roll music scene that existed here in Los Angeles that we wanted to be authentic. So, yes, we used Paramount, but we really only built a few sets there, like swing sets. The production, when you are on stage, the location department still interfaces with, we do a lot of coordinating, but there are people on lot people that handle it. The production office handles some things, but this was a very large project. And at the time we were making it, it was kind of the streaming gold rush. It was post COVID, well, actually in the middle of COVID. But there was a lot of production going on in Los Angeles, even though there was COVID, because we had been shut down for so long. So Paramount was packed. It was packed to the gills. Every soundstage was packed to the gills. And so coordinating that at Paramount, not really being the biggest show there, but an important one. And it was central to us being close to Hollywood, close to a lot of what we wanted to do being at Paramount.
Hmm. So I want to roll a couple questions together here. I want to ask about the kind of research that you did, but also it sounds like some research had been done by a previous location manager and then COVID happened but then maybe that was thrown up in the air. So what kind of research did you do and how did COVID impact what you had inherited?
Okay. Well, a lot of research had been conducted by the art department, okay, by Jess Kender, who was the production designer. She had, an amazing set decorator, Lisa Clark. And so they had a lot of time prior to me joining the project to research what they wanted to do. Both a big overview of Los Angeles, lots of different looks, lots of different references. And then there was already a location manager on in the early going. So they had done quite a bit of scouting and figured out things like Pittsburgh, and what's Pittsburgh going to look like in Los Angeles, right? Where the Dunn brothers, before they come to Los Angeles as a band. So I inherited probably the Pittsburgh locations, the laundromat where they meet, the fraternity party, things like that in the early going, the Dunn House, which was in Angelino Heights. So, early conversations with Jess Kender, she had done a lot of research, some great research. I had done some of my own research prior to starting it, just to be able to have some of my own kind of takes on things, and a little bit of input if they wanted to listen to it, and suggestions. I still had my research from doing another project 20 years before that, which was titled Almost Famous. So,
One of my favorites.
I had to go back and kind of find some of that research, but, and some of those references are, readily available, but kind of obscure. Things like Ed Ruscha, who's a conceptual, painter here in Los Angeles. He had a project that was ongoing where he literally photographed every part of Sunset Boulevard from one end to the other, both sides, over the course of about 10 or 15 years. So it's literally every storefront is in Ed Ruscha's, kind of art piece, really. It's a conceptual art piece. So I have that book. It's a really hard to find book. So it was great to kind of look at that stuff. But when you're doing the 60s and the 70s, you're doing the 30s and the 40s and the 50s too. you know? So that, Sunset Boulevard had references to all those decades, in the late 60s and early 70s.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. So for work like what you did, you're supervising location manager. You have a team of people who are supporting you.
right.
How many people were part of a project like this?
In block one, I had 19 people in my department, which is it's a big department. It's probably, two and a half to three times what the normal kind of location department is. Some of them were scouts, a lot of them were specialists in logistics, some of them were my friends that were familiar with and colleagues that were familiar with, um, you know, trying to make West Hollywood work, right? Which is a whole nother thing we can talk about, which was really important part of the movie. So I had multiple people at each location, both scouting it as well as prepping it and communicating well in advance of us arriving, because it really was a big takeover pretty much wherever we went, whether that was a neighborhood in the canyon or up on Sunset Boulevard. So yeah, that's a lot of people. And I think altogether I had about 28 location professionals working for me, a couple additional managers, logistical managers, some scouting managers that helped me with that. So yeah, I had a great team. I'm just so fortunate. They worked so hard. They really did.
You've talked a bit, even to this point, about what prep looks like, but once filming begins, what are you doing with those locations? I imagine your job isn't just done once you've got a contract secured.
No, so a big part of location managing really is, addressing the logistics and how, I mentioned earlier, how to support each of the craftspeople, the department heads, so that means, going the extra mile for hair and makeup in terms of the way the back office part of a show like this, where you're putting 300 extras through the works, right? And there's 10 or 12 additional hair and makeup people with stations lit, and carpeted and air conditioned for them to be able to do the work that they want to do. So a big part of my team was making sure that those T's and those, were crossed and those I's were dotted for all those craftspeople. Whether that's a cinematographer and the lighting, which we did unbelievable amounts of lighting, for this. Checo Vares was our cinematographer for Block One in Los Angeles, and he's a master. He reminded me of kind of earlier in my career. The way he lit was almost kind of like an old Hollywood movie. I think he had the budget and the time, and it looks beautiful, but he was using a lot of light. And so that required a lot of cabling and prep prior to us arriving at a location, in addition to the art direction. So sometimes we'd be prepping a neighborhood for weeks before we started shooting there.
Hmm.
Laying cable, art directing the neighbors. We also art directed 360 degrees, if that makes sense. So when you stand on a street, even though we think we're looking, at the one house, the hero house, and the reverse, the turnaround, if you just turned around and looked, we kind of art directed as much as you could possibly art direct for safety reasons. We had the ability to do that in many cases, and where we could, we did do that, which gave the filmmakers and storytellers the freedom to say, okay, let's go across the street, let's do a walk and talk, let's do this, let's do a reverse. A lot of that stuff is planned, but if you're going to go to the trouble of doing 50, 60, 70% of it, in some cases you might as well just do, not 100%, but you would do more. You would do more than you probably would on a regular TV show. Because of the period nature, we just wanted it to be so authentic. We didn't want to catch anything that wasn't period correct, whether that was up on Sunset Boulevard or anywhere else we were going. Let's art direct it, let's cover it with a picture car, let's light it differently. So yeah, there was a lot involved with that.
Mm. To give us a sense of scope, how many locations were there for this shoot?
I mentioned that I guess there was in block one, which was basically shooting episodes 1 through 5, and some parts of some other, episodes in the first block. I bet you there was about 35 locations, you know, um, like 36, 37. I mentioned, some that we ended up, shooting at, and actually some we didn't even get to because we were just so busy, there was other connective pieces that we used to kind of be able to, cheat it or whatever, but you couldn't tell. But yeah, Port Authority in New York, we did that in a tunnel and underneath Grand Avenue, in Los Angeles. Looks exactly like Port Authority. We never got there. We were still at the Staircase Theater in Pittsburgh shooting The Winters and the band. So there's some things that you go to great lengths to kind of prep and you plan. And in some cases, we just kind of winged it. We just did it outside the Staircase Theater. And it honestly, it worked fine. It looked exactly like Pittsburgh outside, the Terragram Ballroom where we shot. It looked almost like we could have planned it that way. So, these kind of mistakes or falling behind, they're always there's silver linings to lots of them, which happened all the time. The magic was always happening on days, even though it was challenging. It was such a special project that, and very ambitious project that we just needed the filmmaking spirit and gods with us at all times, and they were.
Hmm. When you started getting into the work, what were the first locations that you were focused on? I know for prep you had inherited a lot of stuff for Pittsburgh, but which
Right.
ones did you turn your attention to?
So, when I met with Mike, I mentioned Mike, the line producer, we had some early conversations about their want and desire to be up on the Sunset Strip and to be out up on the Sunset Strip around basically all night for multiple nights with control on the strip that really hadn't really been done since maybe The Doors, since Oliver Stone's The Doors. And the production, before COVID was notified, you can shoot up on the strip, but you're not going to be able to go all night. You're not going to be able to post blocks and blocks of the street. And those are the guidelines in West Hollywood. And all location managers and producers know that. West Hollywood's a really tough place to film. And it's tough because the residents and the merchants they have serious guidelines about filming and what you can do, and so it was rather restrictive. So the answer to your question was to make Sunset Boulevard a possibility for us. So turning the no or yes, but with restrictions into basically we need to go to town and we need to be able to stay up there and do what we need to do and come back multiple nights. And if we weren't shooting, then prepping over a 24-hour period. So we were up there for 4 days, 24 hours around the clock.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
So that
goodness.
was that was a check that I wrote early that I didn't know I could cash, to be perfectly honest. I told Mike Nelson, no problem, man, we'll make it happen.
We've got this. All right. Just leave
I
it to
mean,
us.
he's like, "Are you sure? Can I tell Hello Sunshine that?" I'm like, "Well, don't tell them that. Don't tell Lauren and Reese that yet, and Scott. But we'll chip away at it. And so, so I'm proud of that. But that was also a team effort, and like I said, that was the spirit of filmmaking and really enrolling the stakeholders up there that had serious concerns. They were excited by it, but it really was a love letter to the Sunset Strip. I mean, in that time. So, so I had that going for me, and I had an incredible team of people, and I have a lot of experience working here in town. So without stepping on any toes, I definitely politicked and triangulated and enrolled people and assured people. So a little bit of my reputation, my enthusiasm, as a location manager, and anyone on my team is really the ambassador for a project. So many times we're the first, my team and myself are the first people that someone meets, whether that's someone who's running a nightclub or runs an HOA in a high-end neighborhood, with a bunch of mid-century homes and in the Hollywood Hills. We're the first point of contact for folks. So the impressions that we make and how we enroll people is really important, and you don't always get a yes, and a lot of times you get a no or a maybe, or so you address their concerns and bring them along. So that was kind of the first thing I was tasked with is, okay, you need to find a band house, which should be in Laurel Canyon. We know it's tough to film in Laurel Canyon logistically, but we need a band house, and we need a groovy Billy and Camilla's house, right? And we also need the other 70% of the locations, but make Sunset Boulevard a possibility. And as soon as you have some idea about that, oh yeah, and we also want to shoot at the Riot Hyatt.
Hmm. How does
So
it change things for you? Because obviously there are some locations that are just you just obviously need them, and then there are some that are a blank slate, like some of the like the houses that you just mentioned. How does it change your approach when you've got something that's more of a blank slate?
right. Well, the blank slate, you want to lean into the research. You still want to believe that, it could be in Los Angeles, that it could be located in Laurel Canyon. If not, then it's in another canyon that could double as Laurel Canyon, right? Um, and in some cases, it was scripted as it needed to be in the hills. And if it's a party at night, yeah, I mean, it can have a view of the city, and the twinkling lights and the canyons, but you need to be in the hills. So what part of the hills are you going to be in to be able to do this thing? There was a lot of specificity, um, that Jess Kender and that Lisa Clark and that the creative team and writers had. It was in the script, so we need to find this amazing house where, Daisy and Simone meet. They meet doing coke in the bathroom. We didn't even end up shooting that scene, but in the book and in our script, we needed to find this killer bathroom, or we needed to build it on stage. And and it needs to have a city view, and it needs to be like something really like groovy. So I found the house, and it had an amazing bathroom. I mean, you didn't need to do anything. It was like Liberace's bathroom, it was just like, you wouldn't believe it. And it would have been perfect. It was all mirrors. And, we just, we ended up shooting there, but we didn't shoot all the scene work there, because we had 4 or 5 other locations that day in West Hollywood.
As somebody who's not in the industry, I'm sitting here trying to imagine how you find out what a somebody's bathroom looks like. Are you knocking on doors and saying,
So,
"Excuse me, can I
yeah,
look at your bathroom?"
you literally are. You're leaving scouting letters. You're also working with location services. And so location services will list properties, very simple, properties, family homes, depending on whatever that looks like. You'd be surprised that comport yourself, present yourself, have a letter, a business card. Sometimes you leave a letter in a mailbox or on a doorstep and you hear back from people. Often you don't. In the case of that really groovy Hollywood Regency house that was almost, it was like a time capsule. It was dressed already. It was kind of crazy. And so the family hadn't really entertained filming. It was for sale. So I reached out to the real estate broker and spoke with a real estate broker about it. And that gentleman said, well, someone's bought it. They're going to tear it down and build a big, huge, you know, like monstrosity, like right above the Sunset Strip, kind of near Laurel Canyon, kind of like just up and behind the Chateau Marmont, right? And so he was down for it. Of course, it had no parking. It had one driveway. I mean, to bring a whole company there, maybe that's why we didn't get to it, is I brought him to a location that was probably unshootable, but it was fantastic. So that's what we did on Daisy. If it was fantastic, we didn't really think about the wagon. We just thought about the horse. If the wagon's going to kind of control the horse, like where are we going to park, the logistics, those are important things. But on Daisy, we were constantly just going for the look and what was authentic and what was just, beyond, like, from God. Like, this place was like, you can't believe it. I mean, Jess Kender, the production designer, was just like, it was like a time, it's like literally time stood still. Like, the people didn't take the stuff away that lived there. And it must have been some really groovy, stylish couple that had lived there for years. So the sofa, everything was just like ready to go. And the bathroom was like to die for. So when that happens, you just have to go there, even if it's logistically almost impossible. I think that I know a lot of department heads scratch their heads or probably, why has Jay brought us to this place? Well, we shot the Formosa and we shot Rod's apartment building, which is a really groovy apartment building. I think we did another drive-by and we did that house at night, all on our first night in West Hollywood. First of 7 nights in West Hollywood, 4 on the strip. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's how things kind of go. We were just going for it. And so was I. I was never really thinking about the logistics. Although they're important, I just figured we can find something that's so unbelievably cool looking, or that we can transform it, then let's do it.
In terms of authenticity, which is a mention where you had just mentioned, I mean, we've talked a little bit about, of course, this is 60s and 70s, this
Right.
show for the most part. And yes, you're trying to keep it period correct, but what does that actually mean? What are some of the main factors that you're looking for when you're looking at locations that will alert you to this could or could not work?
Well, at the top of our conversation before you pressed record, we were talking, when you're doing the 60s and 70s, you're actually doing the 30s, 40s, and 50s too. So, yes, there's, mid-century homes, important homes and other things that were built in the 60s and 70s, that are nondescript, that are great homes, or they're, businesses and things of that nature. But, there's almost nothing you can't do with art direction. But you always like to find something that has some of the aesthetics, some of the elements, in it. For me, it's really important what's scripted and how we're going to shoot the scene. I mean, it could be an amazing looking place. It might not be shootable because of the spatial relationships that exist inside that location, right? How are we actually going to be able to shoot this to be able to not just put a camera, but really see where people are together? Billy and Camilla, and then Billy and Daisy, right? And so they're the relationship that they have, both in the room and together, and how it's shot inside a frame goes into finding a location. I'm thinking about that stuff before I'll even, present a location to someone like Jess Kender, right? She'll say, well, I like it. And let's talk about the things that we like. And then we'll show it to the DP and the director. And then we'll start getting into the nitty gritty about how are we going to shoot this thing here? It looks great to the naked eye, but the camera, the frame only sees one thing, right? And so how are we going to do that? The closeness between people, the separation, where they are in a room are all things that are really important when you're deciding on a location. Maybe not initially, but it might be a DP will say, I love this place. Well, we like it because of the view. And he'll say, I don't see it. I look through my lens, I don't see the view. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist here and we might see an element of it but if we're here for the view, we need to be here for another reason other than just the view, right?
Hmm.
So what the naked
Right.
eye sees and what you kind of go about telling a story and how you construct that are kind of two different things. So you're constantly weighing that with, being a location manager and trying to support people. But you're constantly having those conversations when you go to a location, especially initially, and Jess Kender is an amazing, production designer. And Lisa Clark is a great, that just really the crafts on this show were top notch.
Mm. When we think about existing venues, well, they're all existing, but things that you are named in the book or the script, and then we're going to
Right.
see that place. Talk to me a bit about like the permitting or clearance process. I'm sure a lot of this is relationship management, like you've been talking about, but when it actually comes to like the finer details of legally being allowed to be in a space, what happens there?
So that's a great question. And I had an amazing, permits specialist. It's a company in town. I mentioned there's location services, there's permit service companies that handle permitting. So they handle, yes, we speak with the merchants and we speak with the residents, my team, but his team will actually go out and get the signatures after we've had the conversation. So there's lots of approvals that need to happen. And those approvals come in by way of signature surveys with the community. And so the permitting of this show, I really wouldn't have been able to pull off West Hollywood without Owen Lee. He's the permit specialist at Pacific Production Services. He lives in West Hollywood. He's a part of the queer community there, and it helped. Owen had relationships. I told you the little anecdote about the Sunset Strip that I wrote a check I wasn't sure I could cash. Well, Owen's the one who really facilitated like some of the early conversations. He primed the pump for me to be able to speak with people, giving them the context, talking to them about, me and what we're up to and how special this thing is. And knowing that, the production was told, we'd love to have you on Sunset Boulevard. You just can't go all night. You can't shut down lanes. So it really was a great permit specialist, who really took it. And he was really our partner. I've mentioned him in just about every interview I've done, for Daisy, which I've been fortunate to do a few. And a lot of the credit goes to Owen and his team and coordinating with him. Yeah. I think I had my initial conversation. Owen called me on a Friday night, probably around 5, and said, I have Eddie Robinson, who's the film commissioner, runs the permit office in West Hollywood. He said, I have Eddie Robinson on the other line. He wants to talk to you. It's the first time I really had a long conversation with Eddie very early on. And it was a 3.5-hour phone conversation with him. And just really me talking through what we wanted to do. It's like a good thing I had the one-line schedule kind of in my head and everything I wanted to do. And the idea that we would plant our flag in a place like West Hollywood for 7 days straight and film all different parts of West Hollywood and try to make that work with all the clubs and all the stakeholders, it worked out really well. But that was the initial conversation that really opened the door with West Hollywood, is that it was a love letter to the Strip. This was going to be a good thing for West Hollywood, not just for the council people and the politicos, but for all this merchants, and especially coming out of COVID, where, all those live music venues have been shut down for months.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So when I'm curious in terms of like having backups, um,
Yeah.
when you're scouting and you need one location, how many options are you coming up with? Or are there times when you just have the one perfect place and you're hoping against hope? What does that look like?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, sometimes it's the one perfect place, and any other kind of backup, um, maybe exists, but it's not even comes close, right? Um, I it's funny, I'm not a big backup person.
You're
I
all in. Like, yeah, this is what
I
this is going to
I
look
mean
like for me.
I mean,
Yeah.
they exist, but I kind of think in the world of possibility that, a lot of people say, even people that are like, what's your backup? And I'm like, I'll just be honest with them. I don't have a backup, dealing with the landlord who owns the whole block, of, Sunset Boulevard where the Viper Room is and Sunset Liquor, you know, um, great guy, but, not the greediest landlord, but not an easy guy to deal with. He's kind of like, yeah, I just think it's too invasive. I don't really want to do it. Where would you go otherwise? I wasn't going to tell him I was going to go, to Sherman Way in Canoga Park that kind of looks like it if you kind of are smart about how you shoot it. But no, why would I share my backup? We're going to make a deal. So Yes, they're backups. I had a backup for every one of our Pittsburgh locations, but that was just something that, I didn't force that on them. But if it didn't work out, then, I had another place that we could go to, you know. But the idea was make these happen, Jay. We've already picked these in the early going. So, it's important to have backups, but I think without getting too hooey energetically, then I'm not a big on backups. I'll get a
Okay.
backup when I need a backup.
Yeah. Okay. I like it.
It's a
That's
little bold and
the
probably showing all my cards that way, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I want to win. I don't want to be second or place.
you don't want to be the muse, you want to be the somebody. That's what they say.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
um,
So
so
yeah, there weren't a lot of backups. The other thing about it's funny about a backup. I think it's in your list of questions you sent to me. So Billy goes to rehab, right? And I mentioned earlier in our conversation the idea of crossboarding. So in addition to having Billy go to rehab, and we had a rehab, a great place in Sierra Madre called the Alverno School. You've seen it, it's an amazing, it used to be a nunnery. It's a older Spanish Mediterranean building. It's got unbelievable grounds and character. I won't go into the details of why we at the last minute weren't able to go to the Alverno school, but it was really about permitting. It was about how many times the Alverno school had been used in other projects and things of that nature. Anyway, we lost the Alverno school, which was rehab, but it also needed to have a chapel because there was a scene when Daisy, as a young girl, is in chapel. It's just a small scene, but it was an important scene. So we had to combine a few things. And I've always wanted to shoot at this place. Of course, now I'm drawing a blank on the church, but it's in Palos Verdes Estates. Palos Verdes Estates, you just don't go there as a location manager. It's a bedroom community. They don't really want you to film there. Beautiful homes, really nice people, but the permit department there at the city, you can do it, but you're not going to kind of do it last minute and jam it in there. And of course, I wanted to shoot at this church, and I wanted to use this as rehab. We hear about rehab in Malibu or Topanga, right, where these rock and roll people and stars in the 80s and 90s even went to go dry out, right? So I wanted to put it, kind of in Malibu. You're not quite sure where you are. So my backup was a place that was almost impossible to shoot at. But I really knew that it was the right thing for us to do. Like let's put it at the ocean. Let's put it at this place that kind of feels like, that it's special. And, Jess Kender really appreciated it. And I never really told anyone it's next to impossible to film there. I think I had a permit over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend and then shoot there like on a Tuesday. And I had no idea whether I was going to be able to pull it off or not, to be perfectly honest with you.
oh wow.
But, it ended up going great, and I don't really know if it makes it into the series. There's a few beats about it. I don't even know if the Daisy and the young Daisy in the chapel, I think there is one little, but my team, and that's just kind of what I do. If it's the backup, then I want to go to the place that probably is even better, but it might be even more logistically, difficult to do it.
Hmm.
But in that case, I really backed myself up into a corner. My Thanksgiving weekend, holiday weekend was definitely compromised because I think my
Oh.
team was like, I can't believe that you suggested this place. But at the end of the day, the creative team loved it. You know what I mean? And it was like, wow, if we aren't going to go to the place that we thought was the best, this place is even better. So yeah, my backups are usually probably not the smartest backups, but the backup are the one that like, well, no, the backup is the where Jay wants to go. You
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, that's
I
just your
say,
wish
not that I know,
list.
not that I know any
Yeah.
better, but it's just that, yeah, I get a wild hair and I'm kind of like, yeah, this is, I'd scouted the church before. It's crazy that I can't remember it. I should have written it down. It's beautiful. Spanish Mediterranean. It does have an amazing kind of smaller chapel that was perfect for the Daisy scene. And yeah, Teddy goes to visit, Billy there, you know.
Hmm.
Um, it was a beautiful spot. And it worked out fine. Like I
Yeah.
said, the gods were with us. The spirit gods of making music and making something special were with us on Daisy for sure.
Who needs to approve these locations when you come forward with options?
So it's a collective. The first person who needs to really sign off on it is Jess Kender,
Production
the
designer.
production designer. She'll come up with um, she'll come up with her take. She'll take some reference photos. She'll take kind of plug that into her research and do a little bit of mock-ups, and then she'll share those with Scott and Lauren and James Ponsolt, our first our Block One director, as well as Mike Nelson and our DP, and then we'll come and we'll basically do a location scout, and we'll look at not just Jess's first pick. We'll probably look at two or three of what she likes, and the show was really old school that way. It was driven by Jess in the beginning as the production designer. She had the relationship with Hello Sunshine and the trust, and she was really spearheading um, the process with that way, and we had a great give and take, she and I, kind of coming up with different ideas, and what we want to do and how we wanted to execute on that, and maybe even think outside the box sometimes, right? About how to
Hmm.
do that. It's such a great team of people. She could transform a place. She could plug a window. We did a lot of work at places, transforming them. So she wasn't one to say, I really don't like the way that looks. She would just say, well, we can art direct that, or orientate the scene in a way that we'll never see it. A little bit of both. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a collaborative process early on with the production designer, but then we have to bring all the, like I said, we're in the hills, and the Check Over Ace says, I don't see the Griffith Observatory. I don't see the Hollywood sign here. You know what I mean? And I see it with the naked eye, but there's no way for us to see it. Do we really want to be at this Art Deco, groovy house if a big part of it is, we're supposed to see the Hollywood Hills, right?
Hmm.
It probably not going to ever see the Hollywood Hills, you know. So you just have to kind of reorientate what the scene's really about.
Yeah.
So, and Jess was, really, really great in that regard.
Mm. When
Yeah,
you think back on, the locations that you worked with for this show, what do you think of as, and you may have already answered this at some point along the way, but what do you
yeah.
think of as your biggest win? And what do you think of as the biggest challenge?
Um, you know, I think the biggest win was pretty much, Sunset Strip, really. Being able to cash that check I wrote early on, and then to actually, get the double lane closures. I mean, we basically shut down Sunset Boulevard. Of course, the sheriff going the extra mile for me, to kind of leave the lane closures up a little bit longer, extend my permit to give me some more grace up there to be able to do the things we wanted to do. Um, you know, I'm especially proud of the job everyone did at Sound City. The assumption was that we made our music, amazing original music that Blake Mills and Tony Berg, and I know you interviewed Frankie Pine. She's amazing, our music supervisor on Daisy. The assumption was we're going to be able to shoot at Sound City. We made our music there. The band is rehearsing there, doing their band camp. And, the owner of, Sound City, it's not just the studio where Blake, the famous studio where all that great music was made by Fleetwood Mac, and, later by Rage Against the Machine and Tom Petty. And, its history is really quite rich. The assumption was we're going to be able to film there. You know what I mean? That we're going to be able to buy out Sound City the studio and the complex for, probably 3 weeks and shoot there for 10 shooting days. That was just an assumption. So kind of, it was like we almost came close to having to build. We could have done some ins and outs and some exteriors, but we came very close to having to build, you know, that amazing Studio One, with that nave board on location. And I think it was really a function of the owner of Sound City, Sandy Skinner, and her family, and the other, there's other studios there. There's Eric's guitar shop. It was very invasive everywhere we went, even if we communicated well. So I think it was really kind of Sound City. I don't think everyone really knew, that we might not be able to shoot there, even though the assumption was all along, of course, we're going to film here. I mean, it's a really important thing. So I'm kind of proud of the fact that I was able to kind of pull that off. And like I said, the gods were with us, Sandy, in the end, I was able to address her concerns, and she was lovely to work with. I mean, she really was. But she, we took over Sound City well, then COVID hit. So we had the variant, right? So we shut down. So Sound City was closed for like 2 months, almost 3 months, and that was pretty tough on the other tenants and on everybody. Some of it was out of our control, but it worked out. It worked out. So I'm proud of the fact that there's probably some other, little things, that I'm proud of the fact that we were able to pull off Billy and Camilla's, that it really looked like Laurel Canyon. That was a really special location that really, was from heaven, when we found it. Really from heaven.
When you think about other projects that you've worked on, what
Yeah.
stands out as different to you about this project?
Um, the ambition. I mean, this was a very ambitious. There was a lot. There was a lot going on this one. Yeah, I mean, I'd mentioned Almost Famous, and we did a lot of live music capture. A lot of our live music capture, was done in New Orleans later, where the band's playing. And if anywhere, with live mics and where the band's actually playing, even though we had a click track and playback. The Staircase Theater, they did play, right? In Pittsburgh that I mentioned. And so, I think it was just the ambition of that we shot all of Sunset Boulevard. Then we went to the Troubadour, right? And played the Troubadour Hoedown. Then we went to the El Rey Theater in Los Angeles, which doubled as kind of a quasi the Fillmore in San Francisco. Then we went to the Staircase Theater. So we basically did 300 plus, extra days back to back to back. I mean, it was kind of like wild. It wasn't that we were shooting continuity. It was just the way it kind of worked out. It was the way the clubs were available, which was another, kind of not easy to kind of get all the clubs on board with what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. So yeah, we shot 3 clubs in a row with 300 extras. So that was kind of like kamikaze, to be perfect. That's not a knock of our incredible first AD, Paula Case or Mike Nelson or any of the creative team. But I mean, having done this before, I was kind of like, well, all right, well, this is the schedule. This is what we're doing. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of wild. They can't be the same background. They're different periods. They're different cities. I mean, so, it was, yeah, that's how we did it. We took our toughest 7 days in a row and then added, 3 live shows back to back in 3 different venues. So that's the kind of ambition, that was, and we pulled it off, man. We did it,
You live to tell the tale. Here you are.
I mean, so, yeah, I mean, I'm proud of that, it was never really an opportunity for me to tell the stakeholders they were nuts, you know?
But if you had been afforded the opportunity, you had some things to say. Well, is there anything else, as we wrap this up, is there anything else that you want us to know about the work that you did, about the work your team did that didn't come up in one of the questions that I asked?
Um, you know, I don't know if we talked about, I think we talked about it before we, pressed record is, I'm really proud of, I mentioned there's 28 location professionals, that worked on block one and block two. I'm just proud of the way that just watched so many young location professionals grow personally, professionally. I think the opportunity I had to mentor, I've been working in this business for a long time. Something that I kind of told my team to begin with, they're all together, 19 of them in block one, telling them all that they're filmmakers. You're a location professional, but you're a filmmaker, you're a storyteller, and actually, um, you know, consider yourself a filmmaker. You're just as important as the department heads, and your ideas, your thoughts, your concerns. I want you to bring them up to me. Um, they had great ideas. They had great ideas about how to handle. They taught this old dog a lot of new tricks. And so I'm really proud to kind of use the wisdom that I gleaned over all these years of working in the business with, um, yeah, some of the biggest like names in the business that I've learned from, Melissa, that I was able to kind of impart some of those things about the process of, storytelling, yeah.
Hmm.
So, and I've just, continued to watch them grow and, appreciate the opportunity that they had to work on this and, for me to work with them.
Hmm. I know it's been a very strange time in your industry, but can you tell us anything about, are you working on anything lately, or is there something that you have worked on recently that you'd like to alert our attention to?
Sure, I'd give a little shout out. So, yeah, there's been a lot of contraction in our business. Some of that was, a function of COVID. Um, then the kind of gold rush, where I think I mentioned in our conversation that it was so busy in town. There was so many productions going on. And then came the strikes. We knew these strikes were coming. And so I started working on a feature titled Good Fortune. It's for Lionsgate. It's a really timely, warm hearted comedy with Keanu Reeves, Seth Rogen, and Kiki Palmer. And Aziz Ansari wrote, directed it, and starred in it. And that comes out in October. And so I started that. We thought it was a little movie I could slip in before, the strikes hit and everything got shut down early here. And so that's coming out in October. And I made that in the first part of 2023. Then the strikes hit, prepped again, kind of this time last year. And we even did additional photography, as late as the fall of last year. So it's coming out in October in the theaters. Good Fortune. It's really special. And I'm consulting for an Amazon series. I can't tell you the name of it, but it's a big time series that's shot in New York that's relocating to Los Angeles. And yeah, I've been consulting for them and I'm just waiting for the green light, hoping it's a big production. It's LA and Japan, and it's going to be fun. Just waiting on actor availability. So very slow, very slow in town. And I hope it's going to pick up. I really do. A lot of my colleagues are out of work across the
Mm.
board. Incredible craftspeople that have not been working as much, if at all. So tough one. Yeah, but
Mm.
that's a little shout out to Good Fortune. It's nice that it's made for the theaters, and I had a ball working on it, and a lot of talented people that I mentioned in the cast and on the crew. I had a big location team for that too. And this Amazon project, that was one of the same producers that I did Good Fortune with. He's a New York-based producer, a real auteur. So I'm excited to work on this upcoming Amazon thing when it gets a green light, if and when it does,
Well,
Knock
we'll
on
have
wood.
to keep
Knock on wood.
watching. We'll
Yeah.
watch for your IMDb to see the updates. But thank you so much, Jay, for taking all this time and
But,
breaking this down for us. I learned a lot about the
yeah.
work that you do, and I hope that others did too.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and best of luck with your podcast. And I'm going to keep watching. I know there's a bunch of other interviews that you working on posting right now with some of my colleagues. So I'm thrilled.
Yeah, well, thank you for doing this. And to everybody who is watching this, go out there. Don't be the muse, be the somebody. Bye, everyone.